Gosh, I know this is lame. It doesn't make a difference either way, but I wish that we had 8 episodes in our second season.
Okay, can I be honest?
It doesn't matter.
Do you see why I was like, should this be a 2-parter? And I was like, this is a long enough one for a 2-parter.
That's what some podcasts are doing, by the way. The Big Picture did one on Friday, and they released another one today. We don't have to. It probably doesn't matter at all. I don't know why 8. Do you know what I mean? It's like 8 or 10 or 12.
No, because that's what it's recommended for. A season. They always say like 8 to 12 episodes, that kind of thing.
Right. It doesn't matter,
I think
though.
this is like a summer mini season, and
it is. And to your point, and we've covered this the last couple of calls. Like, I don't even know what we're going to see at the movies for the next 6 weeks. Frankly, if you and I go to the movies, like, we'll see.
I just paid for my Alamo Draft House. I'm like, I don't know what exactly is coming out, and I was sitting on my phone, and I was like, some of this, because it sounds like you saw the Odyssey twice.
I did. And my last stop is 70mm IMAX, which, Mia, it is sold out for weeks, if not months.
That's what John said.
The IMAX theaters,
like, it's sold out.
Yeah, the IMAX theaters in London are sold out until September. So what we are looking at is potentially what could surpass Gone with the Wind for the most commercially successful film of all time. I mean, this is unheard of. I was just looking up the IMAX stock. Year to date, it's up 7.2%. Over the past 12 months, 34%. And over the last 3 years, IMAX stock is up 128.5%. I mean, this is a commercial event. Today, as of today, July 22, it has made over $264 million, and it has been out less than a week. So I do want to see it in IMAX 70mm. I just have no idea when it's going to be, which is why I grabbed you last Thursday. I was like, we have to see it today.
Well, I was like, I've got to see it the first day.
It's not in the format, but like, whatever. We're not going to see it for 3 months then, you know?
Well, John was like, do I need to see it in IMAX? And I said, no, actually, my seat was shaking in a regular theater.
You're right. The sound was wild. Yeah.
The sound was awesome. So I was like, you definitely don't need it. You're not going to miss it. And then Keisha was like, John, what time are you going? A late night Saturday. And I was like, honestly, this one, you are awake. I was not looking at my phone. I was not checking the time for this, which is not typical. Sometimes I do check my phone for a lot of stuff.
I know.
So, actually, I'm going to start my recording over because I think we're already in. Otherwise, you're going to be clapping 3 minutes in. Are you already recording?
I was recording when we said record before. You could just leave it if you want.
Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah,
leave it.
Let's just leave it. I mean, Mia, as far as we talk about. Well, here, let me start. I'll give our intro. Hey, welcome back to another.
Wait. Let's clap. One, two, three. Okay.
All right, welcome back to Season 2, Episode 7 of Do You See What I Mean? And obviously, we're covering the biggest film of the year so far, The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. And Mia, we were just talking about some of the headlines in cinema, and really this week, this is the major headline, is The Odyssey. We'll get into it in a second. The only other headline this week is how 12 states, along with the Attorney General in California, are suing Paramount in order to pause and or stop the Paramount WB merger. That's the only other headline. Everything else is the Odyssey.
And can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Because I
totally.
feel like when people hear these types of headlines, they, if you're really political, you're going like, well, this is, some sort of a monopoly situation that's being formed, right? Or you're just feeling like everything's bottlenecking into one official studio getting to have control and power. But how does this typically roll out? I don't really think people understand. What if it fails? Like, what if this case is not, what if these people are able to take over and acquire this long time historical studio?
Right.
What does that mean? And people are imagining all of these political concepts translating into their film, but Joey, what does it mean to you?
Well, I grew up in corporate America doing communications, and over the last 20, 30 years, the name of the game in any type of public company is growth. That is the ultimate gospel. And sometimes you can't grow fast enough to meet investor and shareholder needs, so you have to acquire. So in across all these different industries, we're seeing all this consolidation. And in film and television, there's not like hundreds of companies anyway. I mean, of course, there are small independents, but there's only five or six of the old movie studios left. And so if you combine them, that might reduce competition, especially because of this tech effect. So you have Apple making movies now, you have Amazon making movies, and Netflix is a tech company. And so now you've got the Ellisons, the Oracle Empire, buying one historic studio, Paramount, and squishing it together with another one, Warner Brothers. I think the meaning is perhaps a bit more spiritual or like emotional to the entertainment community, especially if you kind of know the history of these storied studios. Do I think there's going to be less new movies out? I mean, I don't know. They're still going to make a lot of movies. Um,
I
yeah,
think there's always been a need for this sort of indie film space. And this is where I think there's kind of a need for like what I've been liking from A24, just like a need for a movie
yeah,
theater revamp and a reminder that, hey guys, don't just go see movies like the Odyssey at the movie theater. Don't just give big, like these movies that have these huge budgets, don't give these movies the only play. Like, that's how we have to vote with our wallet and say, I like to see some variety.
yes,
Even when YouTube came on the scene, YouTube was a big driver for indie projects, people who didn't have a lot of money wanting to tell stories. They have so many television series that, like, pulled out from these spaces that, ended up at your HBO, whether it was like, Insecure or High Maintenance or, just there's a space, or what we just saw, what Back Rooms, like
oh,
there's a
Backrooms, yeah,
space
yep,
where,
Obsession.
yes, these things are obviously going to happen, but I think this is where we have to remind investors that we want a variety of stories and points of views being told. So
Great way to
um,
put it. Yep.
it's like we can't control what court systems want to decide what is or was not legal, and we now know there's so much room for corruption.
Yes,
Even starting with
absolutely.
the original attitudes of this deal, like we know that there was always this sort of
Well, and
corruption
and that to me,
vibe.
I think you hit on the real core truth of this is a deal that Trump made with Larry Ellison because all the tech CEOs have kowtowed, including you, Tim Cook, and I'm ashamed to be in the queer community with you. I'll cut that comment. That was odd, but every tech CEO is cozying up to Trump. Larry Ellison, that is this deal. This is a
Yeah.
Trump Larry Ellison Oracle deal. By the way, Mia, have you seen Larry Ellison and what has happened to his face?
Larry Ellison, what happened
I
to his
urge you to
face?
look it up. He is the CEO of Oracle. He was the sort of original
Oh,
billionaire CEO before
oh
the Mark
yeah,
Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks and the Jeff
oh yeah,
Bezoses of the world. This is a
yeah.
deal between him and Trump, and his son is doing it. His son is actually sort of cute. By the way, you can look up him too, David Ellison. Now, some of my industry pals in LA have said, well, they actually love movies and they might want to, keep this great tradition going. Unlike David Zaslav, who came in, spent 3 years at Warner Brothers Discovery doing nothing. He was going to kill TCM. He has made a hack job of HBO. I'm sorry, HBO Max. I'm sorry, actually just HBO. I'm sorry, Max. That was David Zaslav. So this is just corporate, M&A garbage. And that's what I think is at the core of the deal. But other,
Honestly, the HBO situation has
I
probably
know,
been one of the
I know.
saddest to watch because they were always the lead in willingness to take those risks on things that not everybody cared to take a risk on. And then all of a sudden they just started selling off their little assets. Now you don't even need HBO for its shows. It's gone here, it's gone there, it's on Netflix, it's on this
Right.
channel.
Right.
Now, honestly, it isn't TV anymore, but it certainly don't feel like HBO anymore either. So
Yeah,
people
and by the way,
left and
HBO
right being canceled.
documentaries under Sheila Nevins, one of the most amazing producers of all time. HBO documentaries used to be incredible. Their stand-up used to be incredible. They did some of the first original specials, but we're just not
Yeah,
seeing that as much from them
yeah.
anymore. But outside of that Paramount Warner Brothers deal, really the only headline this week is the Odyssey. I'll just throw a couple of numbers at you, Mia, as we start. Over 260 million globally so far. Has not been out even a week. They think it'll hit a billion within a month. Oppenheimer did that as well over a couple of months. Mia, IMAX, which almost went into bankruptcy following the dearth of theater going during the pandemic, their stock is up over 7% year to date. That's 2026, over 30% over the past year, and over 128% over the past 3 years. So this whole technology, film stock, and Hoyt van Hoytema, all the stuff that he's doing, it is actually working. And Mia, you and I saw this on day one. Thank goodness we did, because if you're waiting to see this picture in 70 millimeter IMAX, you cannot get tickets for if you're in London for months, if you're in Chicago for weeks, if you're in LA for months, and New York, Mia. I don't know if you and I are going to see this in IMAX anytime soon. This is sold out in a way that we have not seen since like Gone with the Wind. I mean, this is an enormous box office success.
And interesting enough, it was one of those films that I was willing, like if I had to, I would have saw it a second, a third time, which
Sure.
is not typical for me. I'm usually like, I saw it, good, it'll be out in a month. Like, and if
Right.
I, if I need to revisit. So I thought that that was a really, that's like a pretty good bar in terms of like understanding like what feels like a great picture this year.
Yeah.
I thinking IMAX. I was thinking if somebody told me they're going to see it at IMAX, do I want to go? Ticket price is going to be, give me the price, $35 or some
There
bullshit.
you go.
You
Which is
know,
which is by the
I
way what it costs. $35 in IMAX in Manhattan. That is what it costs. Yep.
okay. I would have been like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Let's do
I
it.
can put that.
Sign me
I
up.
can put that behind this film.
Yep.
It was actually enjoyable. One of the first films I feel like in a well, no, that's not true. But it's one of the films where you're watching 3 hours and you don't check your phone.
I know.
Uh,
I agree.
Sometimes I'm doing this. How far are we in on this? Or you're doing this. Is Alamo Drafthouse about to send me my receipt and tell me when we're almost over? Come on,
You know when they do
Alamo,
that, you have an hour
quit
left.
tripping.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or less. You got
Yeah.
like, okay, we're getting towards the end. I'm like, Alamo, y'all need to stop doing that. Where you send me my receipt and like kind of kill the,
Agreed.
like
You killed the vibe.
like the vibe. You're killing the vibe with that
I
receipt
agree.
text message.
I agree.
I'm like, what?
I agree. All right, well, we're going to talk about all of it. We're talking Homer. We're talking the Matt Damon, the Penelope of it all. Why does she wait so long? And what makes this story retold after over 3,000 years? It's the Odyssey. And do you see what I mean?
After years of war, no one could stand between my men and home. Not even me.
Promise me you will come back.
What if I can't?
All right, folks, Mia's put together a great episode with a lot to cover about this very anticipated picture. So take us away.
Well, let's row home, Joey. I
Row
mean,
home.
basically, okay. Okay, we knew we wanted to see this first day. I knew you booked tickets
For sure.
like 3-4 weeks in advance. You were like,
Right.
this is when I'm going. You moved it around a few times, but by the
I
time we
did.
finally got in the seat, we knew this was going to be 3 hours, that it was rated R, and it's got a lot of ancient Greek homework. So, Joey, do you need to know about Homer before you see this?
Well, it's a great question. I would say no. I would say you don't have to do your Homer work. um, but because you probably know, well, actually, yeah, do you? I would say no, but you'll probably benefit if you have read the poem or you know the general arc of it.
Okay. And you know how I feel about Matt Damon. So when I saw the previews, I was doing this. Oh my God, they brought him back. Okay, why, guys? Why is it that we are so willing to mount all of our forces to go always rescue Matt Damon and figure out how to get
Oh,
him home?
like the Martian.
I don't care if it's Saving Private
Oh,
Ryan.
Saving
I
Private
don't care
Ryan, I
if it's
forgot
The
about that, yeah.
Martian. I don't care if we're watching The Bourne Identity. Everybody has to mount. They're willing to sacrifice everyone's life, any type of budget. We have got to get this guy home every time. So this is a movie that you're going to be like, oh, I think he's done this one before.
Right,
This is
right.
Saving Private Ryan goes to, I don't know, Mamma Mia. Like,
Private Ryan, take me home again. Bang, bang. I don't like the Nazis. Oh my God, amazing.
but no, walk us through, because this movie is clearly, it's a Christopher Nolan film, so this
Yep.
automatically puts millions in their seats. Last movie he did was Oppenheimer, 2023. This was
Won,
Best
I think,
Picture,
11 Oscars, including Best Picture.
Director.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
Took everything home. So do you
Yep.
feel like he's playing fair, Joey?
I mean, it's a great question, and some people have joked this week. What could he possibly do after this? Like maybe Moby Dick, because that hasn't been done, and it seems so big to scale and impossible to film. I thought that was kind of a funny comment, but he, I think, has become the Cecil B. DeMille of the century of cinema in that whole tradition. I think he's doing the most essential stuff that the folks who created cinema in the early 1900s set out to do. I mean, it's not a perfect film, and some of the stuff is missing. You and I saw Disclosure Day too, and after we saw Disclosure Day, we were kind of left kind of wanting more. But and I initially felt that way with this one, but it continues to build and to grow. And like so many of his films, if you see it more often, it will kind of expand in its impact. But yeah,
I think this movie it's edited by Jennifer Lane,
Yeah,
who I don't
yeah.
really know exactly everything she's edited, but let me tell you, this is a hard movie to do. You're talking about like 3,000-year-old epic. It's like,
Yeah, that's right.
but you're talking about something people are pretty familiar with. We all kind of associate Odyssey with sort of a sea-wide voyage. But you really have to lean into people's sense knowledge here. This is not we haven't been in middle school, high school reading this stuff in a long time. But you almost have to recognize there's some things that we are familiar with, we already know, so you don't have to tell us again. Sometimes you can show us something. Sometimes you have to tell us something. It's not the easiest story to go grab and say, I'm gonna edit this down into 3 hours. And yet he does pull it off. And a lot of it is stuff that we're all filling in with our imagination. If you're really understanding it, it's
100%.
like
I agree with you.
it's stuff that none of us have ever sailed. Okay, first off, there's nowhere in this movie where you are getting a map. Okay, there is
True.
no picture of
This
a
is
map.
pre-map.
Nobody's
Yep.
going, oh, this is where Troy
We're
is.
here.
This is where this, and we're here, and we're gonna
We're
head
here.
home this way. But for some reason, that actually, helps the film that we're a little lost, but we are feeling more familiar than we should be.
Yes.
But this film really works very well in playing with what people think they know and what they think they're familiar with. Even when you're talking about the gods, there's not an over explanation. I mean, you've got a lot of characters that we didn't even have to explain.
Tons.
It's just something
Yes.
about this story that I was like, this is not easy to do. You have to believe that your audience is smart and that they know this story, and they know this story almost better than they know, I don't know, their Bible. I mean, but we do. We really
It's
do.
a great point. But you make a good
Yeah.
point about the foundational nature of the text. Greek literature is it's not just like the Bible, it is the Bible. The Bible was written by Greeks in 200 CE. This is, the Quran. This is the Odyssey. This is Moby Dick. These are like the perennial texts. And you're right. I never really appreciated kind of how daring and how bold this is, especially for somebody who tried to make an exciting film about like a science nerd who made a bomb 2 years ago, which, won everything 3 years ago.
Once again,
So
working off our sense knowledge, we just had
yeah,
to believe that
you're
we
exactly
all
right.
understand what a
So
what a bomb does. You
I'm going to
know.
build on your point, Mia, and I want to talk to you about casting. I think that your point applies to casting too, in that by casting Matt Damon, we've been watching him for 30 years. So that emotional magnetism puts us off ahead of the starting line. Same thing with Anne
Yeah.
Hathaway as Penelope, Tom Holland as Telemachus, Zendaya as Athena, Robert Pattinson as Antonius, John Leguizamo as Eumaeus, Charlize Theron as Cersei, Lupita Nyong'o. Do you think that do you think that could be true? The story's too big. He needs big name actors who everybody likes. These are like all favorites. There isn't like a who's somebody who's
There's no
controversial.
weak link. There's
Yeah,
no
there's no
weak
weak
link in
link. So do you
here.
think that
There's
could be
nobody
true?
with
I mean,
personal. He
that's
tends to work with the same people all the time. Although I was
yes.
like, I asked you, I was like, Matt Damon, has he done a Christopher? You were like, no, he was in Oppenheimer. So I was like, oh, okay, like. But Anne Hathaway has been in a variety of his pictures, and so I feel like there was a
She was
dynamic
Catwoman.
where,
She was in Interstellar. Great performance in Interstellar.
yeah,
You're right,
yeah,
and has some of these other folks. Bill Irwin, who plays Polymathus, the Cyclops. He's worked with Robert Pattinson in Tenet. He's worked
yeah,
with, I guess not Matt Damon so far. He's worked with Leo, but I think you're right, Mia, that it does some of that sensory work for you ahead of time. We've all come kind of doing our homework. That is
yeah.
a great
Because if you
insight.
think about
Yeah,
even the trailers, it's like, there isn't really a, let me tell you about a story about a man on a long
yep,
journey home. Like you don't get that. You're really looking for like the visual effects in these trailers, how big of a scale. You're looking at how big of a cast is going to be on those ships. And he really kind of just accepts that if you want to know what this story is about, here it is. It's Odysseus. It's the same old thing you
yep.
were thinking
Well,
it
and here's
is.
something you put in our agenda. You don't have to love Greek myth to love this. The movie assumes you already know the ending, and it's counting on it.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally do know the ending. So, folks, just as you listen, there's no real spoilers to this. I mean, we kind of said that with the invite. We know the story. Any spoiling would be about the themes or perhaps some of the set pieces. So, as if you haven't seen the Odyssey yet, I urge you to still listen to this episode because Mia and I are so brilliant that your insights are going to be abundant after this, and it's going to expand your viewing of the film. But it is true that we've known, this story was written in 900 BCE or thereabout, maybe 800, and it is about a couple of hundred years before that. It's about 1200 BCE at the end of the Bronze Age. So you have empires like the Egyptians, the Hittites, which are kind of modern day Turkey, and the Mycenaeans. So all these folks that we're watching, they didn't call themselves Greek. They were from Mycenae. So there's Mycenae, and there's Sparta, and there's Thebes. These are not folks that got along. These are just folks that were united later, and then we slapped a name on it. Sort of like the country of Italy. It was not Italy until the late 1800s. But we know how this story goes. We know that he does make it home. We know it's 19 or 20 years, and yet we don't know what's going to happen in this movie, and that's part of the brilliance of it. We're going to talk about the imagination and some of these ideas right after this on Do You See What I Mean? Okay, so Mia, we're talking about some of the sense memory that we have going into this film. We already know the ending, but there's so much imagination that's happening. Take us through some of the other big ideas that are happening here.
I mean, okay, the fun part about Christopher Nolan is he's always working with the same toys in his film. He loves time. He loves
Toys,
time
I love that. You're
travel.
right, they are toys. Yeah.
They're just toys. It's like time traveling forward, time traveling backwards. So we were talking about in the last segment, like about the editing, but really this film does not go in this like continuous form where you start off. It's not, listen, it's not the ABC movie that came out in the 90s, okay, where you're starting off on this long, 4 Sunday night journey.
Oh, the Sunday night movie though. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he pops back and forth. So he moves backwards and forwards throughout this film, which actually serves in the storytelling because once again, there are no spoilers, but it does create the tension that we are constantly waiting to be revealed in front of us. So, we get spots of him at home, we get spots of him in Troy, we get spots
Right.
of him on the road or sea. I'm sorry, the sea, okay? We get a lot of that like hop around, but it's not confusing because you're familiar with the story. He's letting the tension kind of build in a very different way of going, not he's not making you ask like what's fixing to happen to this guy. He's making you wonder, how does what's happening to this guy start to wear down on him and change his journey? How do we see how time and the wearing down of loss, of resources, of your buddy connections, of
Right.
how does all that begin to wear on someone on this decade plus long journey? And that's really the tension. So by the time you're meeting all of the like Cyclops and the you're
Sure.
dealing with Poseidon on the sea, like by the time you're doing that, I'm not gonna lie, there were a few times where how I am, I'll turn my head, I'm like, I don't need to be this tense.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
for nothing.
Sure.
But you will feel the tension of this film just because of how they roll through time. So I loved how this one was like pulled together, and essentially it's one big campfire story. You know what I mean? It's one big. You guys never heard of the da 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 da? And it's
You're
like,
right.
no, I have. And it's like, no, you didn't hear about the real myth, the real legend,
And let's
And
not
we
forget.
open up with Travis Scott, man. Travis Scott
Excellent
is the
point.
one opening us up with this whole film, kind of like introducing. He's the opening act for for this
So,
whole show.
listener, if you and I didn't know who Travis Scott was, but the very first frame begins with spoken word, which is so core to what you said, Mia, about campfire storytelling. Which, let's remember, oratory is the very first form of language and story. Now, at the time of this story, which is set about 12,000 BCE, these civilizations that I mentioned, writing was disappearing. In fact, ancient Greek was not made until a couple hundred years later, after Homer was alive, based on the alphabet of the Phoenicians. So when societal decline happens, which is something that we'll talk about in terms of Zeus's law and kind of the modernization of the tones and themes of this film, writing was going away, and so people were singing and telling stories, which is your point. I mean, one of the most brilliant lines, which encapsulates both the power of the story and of Christopher Nolan, is when Telemachus, Odysseus' son, goes to see Menelaus, who was there. He stole Helen of Troy. I'm sorry, no, he stole Helen of Troy back because she was his wife. And he says, you know the story of the Trojan horse, right? And Telemachus says, yeah. And he says exactly what you said, Mia. Yeah, but have you heard it from the inside? And when he says that, you're like, holy shit, wait, no, I actually haven't. What would it be like if there were dozens of guides inside some foul, tiny, wooden, deceitful, gift of Athena? So you're right about the community that stories like this inspire. I mean, one of your questions to us was, why do we keep retelling this exact story for 3,000 years? I mean, I think it's fun to tell. The themes are super universal. But you're right, it's a campfire type thing. And, this is something you said, but maybe it's cinema. Going to the movies is a campfire, I guess, right? I mean, maybe that we don't have a central source of truth anymore. You can be part of any religion, part of any website. You can find any belief that you want on Reddit. There's no monoculture. So when things like this happen, it is a bit monocultural, which is really exciting that so many people are going to this campfire, this movie campfire. I think that's a great insight.
Yeah. No, I think it's something where, we gather to tell stories because there's an element where none of us really want to be forgotten, right? And especially if you're trying to live your life in a big and impactful way, there's a credit that gets paid. So when we look at the story of Odysseus and we're asking ourselves, like, why this guy?
Yeah.
We're talking about a very fallen type of character. He's not the biggest romantic hero that has ever been our television
No,
screen.
talk about it. Talk about it.
I mean, this guy is very unfaithful. This guy, I mean, that's the whole thing with Odysseus and how he ends up in this path, is that he's a trickster. He is a complete trickster who ends up with a trick played on him for the next decade.
It's a great point.
Because he doesn't play fair. And that's something that shows up in this film, which is like where, you know, when you think about what happens at Troy, there's they kind of keep presenting that there was a code that was broken in the earth, where we engaged in war, we can engage in battle, but there was a dynamic where when, you know, we have to do it almost like within the rules of like being humane. And when you think about the Battle of Troy and what they're doing, I mean, they go into that city and they slaughter everybody and everything.
Yep.
This is, and you know, here was the other thing, because like back in the day, I mean, of course, a lot of these cities are built in areas where you can see the enemy coming. They built walls around these cities so that they could, you know, protect themselves. But a lot of times you're going to find in some of these ancient cultures, they would get surrounded and they'd get starved to death. People really were. Can you imagine being stuck? Look, I got a passport, but can you imagine just being stuck in wherever you live? No food can come in, no food is heading out. We have to just make use, and you don't know how long it's going to last. And so
it's an especially cruel type of like international warfare. And yes, what you're saying is true. In these ancient times, you would have boats and you had bronze. That was it. You didn't have these modern other types of warfare. So if your city, like Troy, was highly walled, sometimes these armadas would just simply cut it off from any trade or supplies and wait for years as these towns dried out. I mean, that is cruel. Yes.
It's cruel. But he did it an extra layer. In other words, they could have waited a little longer and waited for things to starve out. They could have done that. But they didn't. What they decided to do was to trick these people and send in the Trojan horse. And of course, that's one of the scenes I remember you said you enjoyed the most, because you were like, yo, that does not just go according to plan, where it's like, you know, a FedEx pickup box where it's like, we pick up on Tuesday at 2:00. Like, you don't know how long you're going to be in there. But it was something where Odysseus wants to get home. But let's talk about that, because, you know, the waiting aspect in this story doesn't weigh the film down, right? That's how they end up popping back and forth. They help you assume, yes, we waited for a very long time, but then they'll pop back to another time or another place where there's some other waiting going on. So by the time we're really like looking at how this story is being remade for today, it's almost like it's like a campfire that it's a different type of campfire. It's the kind of campfire when you go visit your grandmother and she starts telling you stories. She doesn't start at the very beginning and go, well, when I was a little girl, da-da-da-da-da. She's going to start with, you know, when I married your grandfather, I didn't actually want to be there. And then she's going to roll back and forth in memory. Because you see, I was actually planning to be a such and such. And, you know, before you know it, you've gone back and forwards in time. But you get where I'm at. It's a little bit more of a natural type of storytelling that's happening in your family kitchen, as opposed to a legend
and
story.
Because Nolan has used time as a toy so consistently. Think of Memento, think of Tenet, think of Interstellar, think of Moments in the Dark Knight, think of Oppenheimer going back and forth. I always thought that was just him being playful, and because of his deep obsession and revealing relationship with time. But you're right, that is kind of how we tell stories. Like if you and I were hanging out and I said, here's the story of my last month, I would probably go back and forth, give the major headline, then go back to the beginning. Then I'd think of something that I told you that was in the middle. And that's what he does. So thinking of the Trojan horse story, By the way, I have a theory that he really wanted to make the Iliad because the Trojan horse story takes place in the Iliad, not the Odyssey. So Nolan is kind of cheating, going back to this Trojan horse story. He shows us a little bit in the very beginning. He shows us a little bit in the middle after Menelaus says, "Have you heard it from the inside?" And then he waits to show us the worst, which you just described, Mia, the raping and the savagery until the very end. So 3 times he takes us back. He runs it back and shows us more each time. Let me tell you a little story, Mia. Do you remember that fabulous Brad Pitt picture, which I know is your favorite of all time, called Troy?
I do enjoy Troy, man. It is
like
so
that.
bad, it's good. It's so
bad.
bad, it's good.
So here's the story of Troy. Christopher Nolan wanted to make Troy and was in conversations with the studio back then. They went with Gore Verbinski, who I love from the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy. Arr. So Gore Verbinski actually made Troy. We almost got a Christopher Nolan Troy. So my theory is that he's making Troy. He's just, since it was already made, the Odyssey itself is a bigger story. And so he's bringing in some of the Troy story. He makes it quite pivotal, right? I mean, that's like the major thing is that Odysseus is deceitful and creating this quote unquote gift that is a lie. And listener, what we hear in this picture is this idea of Zeus's law, which Mia was referring to. It's also called Xenia, which is sort of the law of hospitality. And Zeus had this idea that no one could govern Earth unless it was a little bit self-governing. So if I went into your house, Mia, you had to provide 3 things: food, shelter, and safe passage. And I, as the stranger, if I was a stranger to you, had to accept them. And there's kind of a profound idea there that, hey, if everybody followed that common value, the world would be at peace. Think about how things are today. We have no shared common values. Even in the U.S., the left hates the right and vice versa. That these values are not shared anymore, so society starts to crumble. So the Trojan horse idea is you violated Zeus's law because you're pretending that it's a gift, but really it's death. They had this line in the movie, remember, Mia, when they said, you turned a fight into a hunt, and you broke something very societal and deep. These are some of the core ideas that kind of circle themselves in the picture that keep going back to it and going back to it,
Well, and I think Christopher Nolan does something a little more interesting than what was done in the Troy film.
In Troy,
yes. The Troy film has this concept going on where it's asking how much of our life is competence, how much of our life is luck, how much of us were just like born lucky and able to handle certain things, how much of us need the gods. And, you see a certain line of ridiculousness throughout that film as people play with, they play around with those buttons of like, miscalculating. But Nolan does something a little more human here. And he basically kind of goes, like, in other words, in this film, yes, you have the presence of these mystical kind of gods and but there's a dynamic to it where it's a little further removed, and we're more left with people's reactions to how, their lives have to endure like these types of tragedies, which is a little more realistic. So it's a little less of Brad Pitt winning every battle,
yep.
Like
with a very platinum dye, not platinum. It's like a honey dye. You remember that hair dye, the style?
Yeah,
it was flowing.
It's a beautiful wig. Yeah, he had a beautiful wig.
Yes.
Was it a wig? A hair
piece. It probably was. Yes. Is there no one else? As he slays that one guy. But listen, there are so many awesome performances and characters to talk about. We're going to get into it right after this on Do You See What I Mean About the Odyssey?
Okay, so here's the thing I did, going back to that whole Troy film and like how they're kind of playing it off with the gods. They have a little bit more of that like superhero mythology dynamic happening in that film.
True.
This one is much more human. These are regular people with regular powers who are literally using their wits and their minds to get through challenges, which makes this film feel a little bit more old school in its filmmaking style and a little less like I showed up to a Marvel movie. Versus if you did Troy today, I think it would feel like we walked into the Marvel version of Greek characters
Yeah.
because you know, Brad Pitt and even what's his name,
Well, Eric Bana was in it.
Bana. They're just kind of playing those battle scenes with a certain type of.
Yeah, bravado.
We have like a kiss from the gods, so we can do things. You know, twist, jump, dagger our swords like no one else. And this film is a little bit more of like, how do we get out of this cave, y'all? Like, what are we gonna do? One at a time, two at a time? How are we gonna row this boat? Can we all swim? Can we all, can we sail? Do we know what we're doing? And so it doesn't have that, Marvel DC dynamic to it. It really does feel
Right.
like a very human, Nolan film, which I prefer. I actually prefer that.
I mean, and this is a bit more human than some of his other films, honestly. Interstellar, the stakes are so big and the project is so complex. There are some individual stories, but you're focusing on mounting that huge thing. Same thing with Inception. In the Dark Knight films, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, which Nolan did. They're not human and naturalistic. And yeah, this is very human. It's often just a couple of actors and some robes on a windy hill. It's very naturalistic for him. Yeah. Yeah. Now, talk to me about what you thought about the cast. I mean, this is so star-studded. You're helping me understand that maybe that's a good thing because of the emotional work that we do with them. I initially thought these folks are too buzzy. They're in too many pictures. Anne Hathaway, you cannot ask me to imagine you as a strung-out pop star, a fashion editor, and running away from dinosaurs, and all the things that you've done this year, and now Penelope, it's that type of effect. But now you're helping me realize, well, maybe that was smart casting because we already like all these people. What did you think of the cast and how they did?
Okay. Matt Damon, like I said, he's constantly needing to be rescued. I mean, kidding, no, but I think Matt Damon is really fun. He does have a touch of humor to him. He's not always funny, but he does have the ability to pull out some comedy and really more laugh at himself. So that helps. Characters who can laugh, actors who seem to be capable of laughing at themselves in the script always come off more endearing and charming, and he does do that here. Anne Hathaway, she does a lot of her pouty Rachel getting married dynamics to me in this. Sometimes when she's overdoing sad, I do get a little tired. I get a little tired.
I hear you.
And I thought when she was pulling off like the angry and the intensity of that, like some of those scenes that she has with her son, played by Tom Holland. I'm gonna be honest. I was really kind of wishing someone else was there, but I also walked away with an appreciation, going, "Okay, Anne Hathaway, you did something that a lot of actresses cannot pull off. Most of them have a hard time transitioning out of certain cutesy, lovable roles, right? And they don't know how to do that without taking their clothes off or creating these like very suspenseful, sexy thrillers. And Anne Hathaway seems to have a lot of range. And I think as she's getting older, I was like, you know what? I really appreciate how she's crafting out her career with what she's done this year. She's telling us she can still be that pop star if she needs to be.
And sing a whole album.
Also, yeah, she can also get really overly dramatic, be a little more strung out. She seems to be able to tackle some horror in that film as well, like Mother Mary.
Mother Mary, yeah.
She seems to still know how to do a big old, like, not rom-com, but a version but in an adult way.
Devil Wears Prada too.
I think she's just like aged with her demographic in a really clean way that a lot of actresses can't do because they're afraid of no longer being sexy. And so I think her her approach to going, I'm gonna do something that's more, like I said, the Interstellar. It's a little more Jodie Foster, to be honest, like
Oh, that's
what she's
interesting.
able to pull off. So I was not mad about seeing her in this film. She knows what she's doing. She's not boring to watch. She's just, it's just hard to believe that she's, Tom Holland's mom. I think that was my only, like, she seems a little, it's a little too aged out for her. But otherwise, Tom Holland, we discussed him. I was like, he does still read like a little boy enough for this type
Very.
of role.
Which I can
And
see why
maybe,
they cast him. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's really perfect. And he doesn't, honestly, he's not a weak link here. And sometimes, you know, with that type, with the role he was in, I honestly thought it was overplayed. Like he was given way too much to do for having too little meaning to the
Yeah.
story.
Yep.
So I had a hard time with him more than anything. So if I had to do anything, I would actually still keep Anne Hathaway, and I would try to figure out how to like
Right.
how to like play down what his issues are in this film, because you really don't walk away feeling like you really understand the depths of what it's like to have to live under the myth of a father that you've never met, never seen, no one knows is alive, and you may have a stepdaddy on the way, baby. Like that was the one storyline for me that I was like, ooh, I wish this could have been traded out with Anne
Yeah.
Hathaway's,
Yeah.
love after lockup, or what I would call prison wives. She plays
Yeah.
she plays that character. And then you get, okay, some standouts for me
Prison
was
Wives.
the Athena, Zendaya. Honestly, sometimes she shows up in movies and you're like, her again. But honestly, she pulls off that Greek goddess like none other. I was like, she sells. She does sell. And I really appreciated her kind of like interacting with Matt Damon. I definitely want to see her kind of like punching out of her weight, I guess is what I would say.
Sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
I want to see her pop into some other things other than playing against Robert Pattinson or Tom Holland or some of these younger guys.
Well, and you hit on it, Mia. So we have. I think that is what I would describe the problem of the casting. The casting didn't seem to bring enough awareness that the three of these folks have a lot of very current and immediate ties. So Zendaya and Tom Holland have been acting together for 10 years in the Spider-Man franchise. They also recently got secretly married, which is very sweet. All the best.
Very secretly. Very
We're not going
secretly.
to we're not going to take bets on how long it'll last. Probably longer than Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. And then we have Zendaya in her biggest dramatic role to date. She shows some real range in a very peculiar character in a sort of a rom-com with Robert Pattinson earlier this year in February called The Drama. Mia and I have an episode on that. Go back and listen. It's obviously awesome.
Yeah.
So there's just too much buzziness around them. I mean, now that I talk this out, I mean, the Matt Damon performance is less bothersome to me. Not the performance, just the casting, because again, it's just so much celebrity. How can you ask us as an audience to imagine Matt Damon, who we've been watching for 30 years? But that actually I have less of a problem with now that you go through this casting. Some of these characters, yeah, I'll tell you, Mia, most of the podcasters I've listened to say they love the Robert Pattinson performance. It's so amazing. It's the
Oh
best
my
in the
God.
movie.
I'm laughing the whole movie when he's in
You
there.
loved it at the end. You loved
Oh
it.
my God. He is fun, y'all. He's fun, but he's always fun to me in movies. He doesn't seem to take himself seriously to where he's not
yes.
able to try new things. And when he does deliver it, he's like, might as well go all the way. And you end up buying it. He works very, very well with Corey Hawkins, kind of playing the suitors
Yes.
hanging around
Yep.
the palace. And they are menacing and obnoxious and bratty and brawny. And
Exactly.
They're the
And
bullies
also-
at high school.
It was very high school. It was the high school lunch table, and they are kind of abusing and making fun of Arameus, who is the blind swineherd, who is a family friend, as well as Penelope and Odysseus' son. Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, in kind of a milquetoast performance, as you're hearing from Mia and I. But the other thing, Mia, is that I thought about Robert Pattinson, and you're on this Christopher Nolan movie, one of the biggest movies of all time, and you've got most of the other guys getting to do some great stuff. Hamish Patel and Matt Damon are on islands battling gods. And all you get to do if you're Robert Pattinson is just wear these like huge robes with, 80s shoulder pads and kind of sulk around, and you're kind of goobery.
He's a politician. He's a hardcore.
Yeah, it was kind of that Roman
politician.
Greek politician. Yeah, the palace intrigue type of stuff. But he does so well with the time that he has. Let me ask you, what did you think of some of the other, two women first, and then I'll ask you about Elliot Page. But what did you think of Lupita Nyong'o as the twin role? So Lupita plays Helen of Troy, which, as we know from the story, she gets, stolen, and Helen is married.
Homie runs out on a husband like she's
No, for sure. Sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. That was misogynist, actually.
Her heart got stolen. Her heart got stolen.
So Agamemnon, who is the king of Mycenae, and Menelaus are brothers. Menelaus, his wife is Helen. She runs off with Paris and Hector in Troy. So Menelaus is like, hey, Agamemnon, my older brother, we need to go fuck their shit up because they stole my wife. That triggers the 10-year Trojan War, the close of which is conceived by Odysseus through the Trojan horse plan. Helen then goes back to Menelaus after 10 years, who defaces her. He deforms her. She has this horrible scar. And he has this gross line when he says, yes, the face that launched 1,000 ships, or maybe 500. That was a bit kind of Hollywood to me. I was like, all right, we're being a bit too kind of pandery. But tell me about Lupita, who also plays her twin sister, Clytemnestra. We don't get a lot of her, but did you think she was effective?
I think this is a very difficult role to cast, and if you learned anything from Troy, it's that we need a person who, when we look at her, it needs to feel otherworldly. And I feel like in the Troy film, they casted what's her name?
Diane Kruger.
Diane Kruger.
Yeah.
And when I tell you, everybody groaned on that one. Everybody was like, Diane Kruger, seriously? Because it felt
I do remember that. Yeah.
Like boring. It felt too like really
it was plain. Yeah, right.
It was plain, and she's a beautiful woman, but it wasn't exactly what the myth and the legend of this type of beauty is supposed to represent. So I did feel like when you see or you hear Helen of Troy, it's like, what can a filmmaker give us that makes us go, okay, I get this. And Lupita does have this otherworldly, haunting look to her that, quite frankly, I was like, yes, this makes sense. No one's gonna argue this. This is a very like it's this, like I said, it's a very otherworldly type of beauty that here's the thing, it's got to be something that just transcends culture.
Yes,
and
agreed.
in other words, you can't cast Halle Berry. That's kind of like who would be the most beautiful? What, you can't cast
because it's too
Charlize
obvious.
Theron. It's because it's so like how do I say this? It's more of like what's commercially understood versus what is so like I said, it's got to have something very otherworldly where you just want to go, I want to touch your face. I want to like, you know what I mean? I
want to be near it. I want to possess it.
I want to be near that. I want to possess it. And I feel like she has that, but I think I told you, I was like, I kind of saw her more hanging out as one of the sirens on the island. Like,
well, that
there
could
was
have been
a few
interesting.
roles she could have played,
Okay, so to your point, could I propose to you a lady shuffle? And I thought this the first time I saw it, and I still think it the next. I do like the performances. I do like all these performers. But I couldn't help but think, what if we rotated things a little bit? What if Charlize was Penelope? Because Charlize is the oldest and the wisest of the group. And what if Lupita was actually Athena? Because Lupita also has a wisdom. And what if Zendaya was Helen and Clytemnestra? Because, Zendaya on the carpet of the Met Gala is the most alluring.
Like,
I mean, in Zendaya...
It's like childlike.
Yeah, and remember, Zendaya has enormous fashion advertising contracts around the world. Her face is in every country in the world. Like if you go to any airport
Yeah.
in Europe and Asia, there she is with like Bulgari or Chanel. And then we could have Anne, previously Penelope, as Calypso in that resort wear, that Ellie, that, Eileen Fisher oatmeal
Right.
long, fishnet trench, and she is seducing Matt Damon. I don't know. I couldn't help but think of that
I
little
see
shuffle.
your
That could have been fun.
shuffle. I do see your shuffle. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, you can't shuffle these women around. That's not crazy.
I know. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I said, there's something about all of these women that I was like, look, there's got to be something that feels almost international, almost
Very.
world,
Which I loved.
world
I love that.
like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a dynamic to all of the women in this cast, and honestly, the whole cast is perfect to me. Like, I think there's a lot of what you're talking about is an area that is where the cradle of civilization is happening. This is
Great point.
this is something that has to transcend just like what an American movie like Troy would want to cast. It has to feel larger than that.
Yep.
For
And
us
guess
to go,
what?
Like, I believe it.
If you were in ancient Egypt after maybe 500 BCE, but if you're in ancient Rome, I know this is Greek, but this story was written in around 900. The Roman Empire started maybe 700 years later. If you were in ancient Rome, you would find Africans, you would find Egyptians, you would find Francophiles. I don't think you would find East Asians because there were the other empires happening at that time. But
Actually, I think they did there's a lot of interesting like sailing expositions that were
this
going
is when
on
trade
and
was
cultures
happening.
were
That's
mixing.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's like you are going to
Absolutely.
find a lot of different people gathering at this space to get at, this empire that
Yes.
created all of this culture. I was like, I think Christopher Nolan kind of captures it in having this all-star cast that, like I said, just feels like
He did.
out of his
I know.
own toolbox, just
Yeah.
otherworldly.
And it almost
And
even felt like
works.
cheating. Like when people would show up and give their performances on screen, I'd be like, well, fuck, of course I love Lupita Nyong'o. Everyone does. Yes, obviously. We love her. When Zendaya would come up, when Charlize would come up. So there is something genius, but almost Trojan horse-ish about it. Horse-ish?
Yeah.
Horsey? Where you're like, well, I can't fault you for doing that. Just a couple of other performances I want to note. You mentioned Rachel Getting Married, which I think is 2008. Really great Anne Hathaway performance. She plays a post-rehab sister of a bride. Bill Irwin is the father, who also is the actor who plays Polyphemus, who is the Cyclops. Bill Irwin, the dad from Rachel Getting Married. Incredible performance. James Remar, for all of our Sex and the City fans, if you remember when Samantha was dating that older guy, very handsome, but clearly older, wearing beautiful suits. That was James Remar. He plays Tiresias, who is the blind prophet on the land of the dead. Another amazing set piece in this picture. And then we have Elliot Page, who the last couple of years, as they have transitioned, have been doing some indie films. They were in Umbrella Academy. They were in sort of a semi-autobiographical picture. Elliot Page plays Sinon, a young boy who is drafted into Odysseus's army to serve under Agamemnon to go take Troy. Sinon is then sacrificed, and Sinon comes back later. Was that not an amazing performance?
For me, this was like that moment where I was like, okay, guys, I feel like this is your best supporting actor role for Elliot Page. Like, I
am with you.
definitely think this is a
Absolutely
role
with
that
you.
it's actually not as big as it sounds, but it is the role that ties in all of these worlds. Not only that, you kind of get something very emotional, vulnerable, capable within Elliot Page that makes you go, I can see Elliot Page in just about anything now, which, as I told you, I was like, I wasn't really an Ellen Page fan.
Yeah.
To see Elliot Page, I was kind of like, damn, like, this person haunted me for this film, and with very little effort.
They are
beyond
so
what
haunting.
his typical acting chops are.
There's a scene when Odysseus and team have to go to Land of the Dead, or Hades, which is where all of the people who have died basically in the world are still there. They have to make a sacrifice of a sheep, and the blood drains black into the shield. Tiresias appears, and if a deceased person drink some of the blood, they may speak, and you can hear the dead speak. And you're right, Mia, it is the encapsulation of the fear and the guilt. It's like if you and I, all the things that we feel guilty about or are afraid that maybe we didn't do right or best, or maybe we hurt people, that there's a dead person who knows the truth and can speak it to you. It was totally haunting, and I hope that there's
it was the only
best
character
supporting
that
actor
is able to
nomination.
really confront Odysseus. And so when you start naming
It's a
all
great
these
point.
big time actors, they're pulling off performances that we've seen them do before. This isn't
Right.
like Zendaya, maybe I set aside. But with Elliot Page, I'm going to say it was the role that ties everything together and makes you realize, like, hey, Odysseus is not a this isn't just a tragedy. This guy has to pay for his sins on this journey, and he has to present back some blood,
Yeah,
sacrifice in order
and to
to
your
make
point, Mia, Nolan.
his journey
This
home.
is an Emily Wilson translation that not a lot of us read in school. This is a newer one, and she's done a bunch of media interviews. Anyway, Nolan softens Odysseus because in the poem he's actually craftier, and he actually sleeps with Circe, and he sleeps with Calypso for 7 years. That's hinted at here. We don't get to see Matt Damon and Charlize Theron make love, which I think is a crime, and I think we deserve our money back. But he is craftier. He is more wily. He is brilliant, but he takes a lot more liberties, and so that was softened for this, I think, to help us continue to relate to him and for us not to fault Penelope for waiting. Now, you made a really funny comment just now. You said something about prison wives, but I have to ask you about Penelope and why she waits so long. Was it worth it? What would you do, Mia, if your husband went off and you couldn't? And this is like pre-mobile phones. Like there's no Zeus Mobile. Like they can't just text each other. He is just gone. So talk to me a bit about that. Did that work for you? Did you relate to any part about that? Or did you think it was insane that she was waiting for 2 decades for her maybe
You know
alive husband to
what?
come up?
I'm trying to remember. There was this movie.
Gone with the Wind.
No, not Gone with the Wind, but
Fern Gully.
there's a dynamic to where
Never ending story.
you know, a certain type of there's a certain type of character, and it's typically women. It's like, do women love harder than men? It's like, no, that's not true. But there are some dynamics where women will love even beyond when there's hope. And I definitely feel like
Ooh, that's a
what
haunting
Penelope is
idea.
trying yeah, because you know,
Jesus.
a lot of times when you kind of look at films, you've got these men who will just, I love her and I love her to the end of the earth, but they have to have some hope. And if they don't have hope, they can move on. And a lot of times with a lot of female characters in films, but also with women in general, they'll love even past the hope. And that is a strength that I think Anne Hathaway is trying to pull off in this particular role. You know, and so when you think about Prison Wives,
Prison Wives.
you gotta have it's a dynamic when you love that hard and you are a smart woman. That shit makes you look really dumb, and that is probably the biggest insult to your experience in life. It is crippling, but it's something where you know, she doesn't, there's a dynamic to what Anne Hathaway is selling here. It's more than just, I'm waiting for my husband. It's like she has she has this concept that's like, I'd rather die going out with my integrity, and I'd rather go out that way than I'd rather succumb in order to survive. And that is something that love can bring about in specific women. And so when you talk about Prison Wives, sometimes I think I sent you a clip where this guy is sentenced to like 75 years.
It's really interesting, Mia, because I could not. It was like I was watching Penelope speak. I mean, so listener Mia shared a clip of the show called Prison Wives, and it's just a 3-minute clip of these two women talking. And there's a woman whose husband is incarcerated. And she even says in the clip she wasn't even that happy. She was unhappy for a while while she was with him before he went in. And her friend says, how long is this sentence? When is he going to be out? And this woman says, 2060. And her friend is looking at her probably like I would look at you, Mia, if you were like, I'm going to wait for 40 years. I would be like, you're insane. And
You
the
are a
woman says, I'd
fool.
rather be happy and in love with someone who is on the inside than be miserable with one of these people on the outside. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And because Penelope is in this palace, she is in a prison, a palace without a king and with all these guys that you don't like. That sounds like a prison to me for
Yeah.
20 years, but she prefers that than taking a suitor. I mean, that clip, Mia, was perfect for this story.
Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely something that does happen, and
It really
it's something
does.
where we
Can't
see
believe
this
it.
with we were talking to, I was like, military wives go through
Yeah.
this where you don't get to decide. I mean, of course this is a military wife, but you don't get to decide when they deploy, you don't get to decide when they're coming back, you don't get to decide much of anything other than finding the joys of, family life, hanging on, hoping. It is a certain type of sentence where you're
It's a
also
sentence.
at
Great.
sea
Yeah,
too.
that's the commonality. Yeah.
And in this case, I think the only thing that's kind of like messing with her head is her son. And of course, Robert Pattinson's character who's trying to I mean, he's deep in it. He's reaching into her deepest, darkest thoughts in
Yes.
the middle of the night.
He is
And
good.
it's like,
Yeah, you got to give
yeah,
it to
he's
him.
very,
Yeah.
very good, y'all. But it's a dynamic where it is something where you see this with a lot of women where it's like, are you a fool? Get out of the relationship, move on. And quite frankly, a lot of times, this doesn't just happen to women, but like I said, women will go to a point past hope where it's like, girl, he's not gonna change, he's not coming out, it'll get well past hope and they can still hang on. And so I think that's really kind of trying to be captured here. I don't know if it was really built as much into the story, which is why I was like, Tom Holland's,
Telemachus. Yeah. Yeah.
Telemachus. That's where I was like, I could have saw less of him, and I could have gotten a little bit more of,
Yeah, I know. Me
a
too.
little range for Penelope. Because I think there's this
Yeah.
whole thing where they're
And I
like,
do
she's
think
supposed to take a suitor at some point, but she keeps unraveling, her, her
yeah,
sands of her
the
hourglass. She keeps flipping it over and flipping it back, flipping it over, flipping
that's
it back.
exactly right. Yeah, she has told the suitors that she will choose a husband when she is done making the burial shroud for her father. And as the poem goes, every night she undoes the work that she has woven that day. Now, to your point, Mia, Antonius, Robert Pattinson, he knows, and he kind of knows the score, and he tries to level with her. Um, but I think this is a Nolan thing. He's just like not a sexy guy. There's no romance in his pictures. There's no sex. There is a scene where Matt Damon and Hathaway are kind of they're it's a tough scene because he's talking about his deployment, but then they lead toward a sexual encounter at the end. It's hard to land as authentic. There's a different movie here, I think, Mia, where they gave us like a 10-minute montage of them getting to know each other and them spending time together and them really loving each other. But without that scene, it doesn't hit the heart as deeply when, half an hour before the end, she is talking to her son, Telemachus, and is like, I want Odysseus. She doesn't want a husband. She doesn't want anything.
Yeah.
She wants Odysseus. And that feels very romantic, but Nolan is not romantic. So
Right. I think
it's
what she
tough.
really was looking for was like, I'm like, maybe she's also very demisexual, but it seems
Yeah,
like,
yeah, could be.
Odysseus is known to be this very cunning and very
Yes,
strategic
exactly.
type of
That's right.
character.
Yeah.
And there's a dynamic where it's like when you're, when that's what you're attracted to, I don't care how hot, young,
Right.
big swinging of a suitor you are, you're always going to look at her and be like, they're too dumb for me, like they are too
Yeah.
dumb for me. So
Yeah.
one of the scenes where they're kind of hanging out
Right.
together and kind of crafting out how they're going to plan out their future, you get a sense where it's like, if you have somebody who you're like, they meet your mind, I'm sorry, everybody's going to fall short. And so that's the dynamic where I felt like it's a little bit more quietly addressed in the film.
Right.
But she likes brains more than she likes bronze. But apparently Odysseus packs all of it, and he's
He
able
does,
to, like,
according to what
you
we
know what
saw.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's sexy that he has both. So
It,
I wasn't faulting his sister. I wasn't faulting
no,
her
I
at all.
agree. But the reunion and kind of the arc of it did make me think of one other film from 2000 that I'm going to ask you about right after this. Okay, Mia, so the other film that came to mind was Castaway. So Tom Hanks and Helen Hunt, they are, engaged. Tom Hanks goes on a plane. He's a workaholic. He shouldn't really need to take that flight. Crashes somewhere in the South Pacific. Comes back 4 years later, and I like Castaway. It's not a perfect film, Robert Zemeckis, but there's a wonderful scene when Tom Hanks comes back and is trying to reintegrate in society, and he goes to Helen Hunt's house, and they're talking in that rainstorm, and Helen Hunt says, "You were the love of my life," But it's been 4 years, and this is in the year 2000. This is also pre-mobile phone as far as its prevalence today. So
Yeah,
Penelope waited
otherwise
for.
he might have called from that resort.
Yes, exactly. Yes, using cellular data or an international
And
network.
that FedEx box.
But that's a decent allegory, because here's a woman who did wait, and she searched, and she had her bulletin board with all of her red threads, and she spent 2 years searching. But eventually, in this modern world, you can't wait, and that might be a difference of our understanding of time in this ancient world versus the modern world. Um, but in that film, Helen Hunt realizes that you're going to spend your whole life waiting. This person is probably dead. So I can have a life, even if it's not with the love of my life, or I can have no life. So it's just a curious thought experiment to put yourself in Penelope's mind.
I don't think it's just that, though. Okay, so there is this thing when you have a connection with someone, right? There is a dynamic where maybe I'm too much of a romantic, but there is a dynamic where people, you can feel it. There's a dynamic where it's like, if they were dead, I would have felt it by now. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's bizarre at all. I think there's something about that weird connection that you can have with someone where when they've walked into the office, you know what I mean? Where when they've, like, come back you can feel it. Like, it's something that signals you, which is not something that's easy to explain. But I think in the film Castaway, that's what she's trying to get across, and that is something that is spoken in this particular film, which is like, if he wasn't alive, I know I would have felt it by now. And so in both films, you have two women who have yet to get that feeling. And I'm going to tell you, that is a very real feeling. It is something about, I don't know how to explain it, where it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but I remember this one guy.
It's kind of metaphysical. Like, there's something that cannot be determined by science or biology. You're suggesting that this could actually be real, that, like, the bond of love, if we think back to Interstellar, love is like a Fifth Element type of thing.
Maybe it could be love, but it's a connection that goes beyond just it's a connection that is felt, that two people really don't have to even say. And when somebody goes away, I'm going to tell you, if you're at work, they're on vacation, or you're like, you feel it. You feel that sort of departure of their presence.
Yep.
And it's like, okay. And it's something where if you've ever had that feeling, when you're watching Castaway and she's going, I kept looking, I knew you had to be here, I knew you had to be here, I had them circling here. It's like, if you don't get that feeling that they're gone, you can't move on. It isn't actually a thing of, like, a tactical process. And that feeling you can't really explain to people. It sounds stupid, but man, when you have the connection, it's like even when they're there, you know, it's like you could be sitting in the same meeting or whatever. It's like
Sure.
it's
But you can
something
sense it.
about that.
Okay, so
that connection. Yeah.
I think that you're right. I think that this, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, cosmic phenomenon exists. So let me ask you this question then. Penelope has been so faithful. She'd waited for 20 years. Odysseus goes off. He spends 10 years in the Trojan War. He spends a couple years battling monsters, 7 years on Calypso's island, and everyone in his crew dies, but he makes it back home with Athena's guidance. And he goes back and he kills all the suitors and he strings the bow and he shoots the arrow through the axe, you know, the axes. And he's lying in Penelope's arms and he says, I had to get back to my beloved. And I was sitting there next to you saying, oh, he's going to say Penelope. Obviously, he's getting back to her. And he goes, Ithaca.
Yeah, that's real.
And I was dumbfounded. I thought, Christopher Nolan, can you not give us this romantic moment? I don't know. Did that strike you? What did you think? I
thought it was true. I thought it was true to
holy
the literature.
shit. This woman has waited for you for 2 decades, and you cite the location before you say her own name? Are you kidding?
Homie messed up his romantic entrance. And it's one of those things that is like
joking?
That's one of those things where that hits hard in the stomach. Like, wait, what? No.
Wait, so like, hold on. So this is like, you and I are married. I go to the Iran war, which is an absurd, needless war. And I come back
your checks still get direct deposited into my account?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay,
and your health benefits are phenomenal. Yes. After I get out, I'll have PTSD and no healthcare system will help me, but you know, we'll just deal with that later. But I come back and you think I'm going to be gone for a couple of days and I'm gone for 9 months and I come back and I say, it's so great to see New York. Like, that's what that was. I was, and Nolan, by the way, folks, this is not a perfect film. Yes, it is pure cinema. The set pieces are the best you will ever see. But there is some stuff here where he's taking such liberties with the text. Odysseus did not have that guilt. The guilt over the Trojan horse was not a plot point. There were tons of gods in the poem. We see no gods except for Athena, or even is it Athena. So there's just some stuff where I was like, I don't know, man. Do you want me to be in love with this couple that love each other? He clearly wasn't thinking about her all that much.
That's why I said, I was like, it's sort of like something that I feel shows up, and I know people are gonna be like, that's not just women. You know, men feel that too. But I'm like, no, it's something about when all hope is lost, you know, like women can still sometimes just really be holding on. Even second, third husbands later be like, that was the guy. Yeah. And so there's a dynamic to that where I like I said, he had been gone longer than they had been married. You know, he had probably been with Circe for longer than they had been.
Well, Calypso for 7 years, yeah.
Calypso's, right. Yeah. So
that could have been longer. Yeah, right.
And so there's a dynamic to that where I was like, okay, from a man's perspective, that makes sense, but from a woman's perspective, when you are dependent in a different type of societal way on a partner, it's not that easy to just let go of your favorite person in that way. He's a little less dependent. It was believable to me that they would have a very asymmetrical dynamic. It doesn't change the overall devotion that we experience, you know, in his return and his ability to kind of perform for her, you know, her ceremony and give her that like win, because that win is for her. Like, I've had to put up with these assholes. Please come here and kick some ass. Like, there is a dynamic to that I thought was really powerful. There's also the scene where he, you know, he was told, man, don't just go back home and introduce yourself. You know, just look around first. Make sure that you see what's going on first. And so he shows up and he takes a look around. And interesting enough, I was sitting there wondering, I was like, is she gonna feel it? And in my mind, I was like, you know what? I get the sense that she does feel it, and it's what's making her so angry, because she's been holding on so long. And here's that feeling again, like he is alive, and this is the very thing that's been holding you back from making decisions. So I didn't. the asymmetrical dynamic of their relationship is obvious, and it is painful when he says
there's also something else as you say this. It is asymmetrical, but when you're in a long-term relationship, sometimes one of the partners will do more of the work to keep the fire of the relationship going. If you're married to someone, let's say, or even just partnered, long-term partnered, and that partner is having a really tough time at work, and that tough time is going to last a year. You're going through a huge merger and acquisition. Your future's on the line. Joey, maybe
whoever that is.
Yeah, right.
Whoever that is.
Or maybe partner B is going through something terrible in a medical way and cannot contribute the same emotional availability to partner A. Partner A will keep the fire burning for that relationship, will believe in the emotional achievement and the symmetry that was achieved in the past. Anne Hathaway seems to have a defiant love. She's saying, no, he is the guy. And even as Odysseus is losing himself, losing his crew, losing his memory, confused as to why he's still out there. And, when Calypso tells him, like, you didn't want to go home. Maybe you've been here because you don't want to. Penelope is not on that same journey. Penelope is steadfast. She's the ultimate torch bearer. She's the candle in the window.
But Joey, this shows up in statistics as well, but it's not as heavy as people try to make it seem. But especially when you talk about caring for sick partners, it's more likely that, like, a lot of women more stick around, a lot of men can't. It's a different type of devotion that people offer. And I think it shows up as a gender-related thing. I don't want to say that it's gender-related. I just think as society's roles kind of like define, who's protector, who's provider, who's this, there is a dynamic where women are more geared towards, like, hey, I might have to do a little bit more of the lifting during certain times. Whereas, in some spaces where there's more, privileges for one part of the partnership, because sometimes this isn't gender, it could be money, wealth, who has more wealth in the dynamic. You're just going to find that not everyone has this sort of ability to throw themselves into self-sacrificing love. Where you're willing to let love just completely transform you. And I think that that's probably where that line lives, where is there always an asymmetry in relationships, or is there always the potential for that? Yes. But I will say this, some partners are more willing to be self-sacrificial than others. Some are willing to look a fool. Some are willing to, seem ridiculous. Love is worth it for them. And love is sometimes something that's more tied to identity and their character. And so, I'm always cracking jokes. I'm like, oh, my Venus is in the first house and my sun is in the first house. But, some people lead more foot forward in terms of how they feel about romantic relationships and what their responsibility is. Some people, I do think, come into relationships and have more of a, what have you done for me lately? And a lot of times I think we've titled those relationships of, like, are you married to a narcissist? Because he's sucking the life out of you and he's stealing every bit of what you have as your joy, and it's like, that's where people are like, you got to get out, girl. He's not going to change. He is going to ruin your life. And people don't understand, like, why won't these people leave these narcissists? But it's like, there is a part of them that's like, no, I do believe in giving, and that love has sacrifice in it, and I'm willing to let it transform me. But they don't, with the narcissist, you don't want to get that transformed. That's when you looking real tattered at the end, girl. Like, he still ain't got nothing. So there is a dynamic to this where I'm like, he's not, here's the thing, Christopher Nolan is not sexy like that, okay? But he does speak very heavily to what devotion can look like. We see it in Memento. Here's a guy who just can't seem to stop avenging something that happened to his wife, even in memory loss. And so that's why I was like, I don't want to put a gender behind this. There's a lot of men who also are willing to play a very long term fool in a relationship when the wife does this. I
Yeah.
love these shoes, you know. I love my fur coat, and we're all looking like, dude, like, I mean, how's cancer going? You know, like, like, you still working? You know, is she working? You know, there is a dynamic that in love you might come out foolish, and it's one of those things for Penelope. She picked a guy that she was like, this one is the best of them all. He's worth it. In terms of Odysseus, though, it may be that some of these sirens put it on him. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, Calypso's like, you were happy. You were just so happy. You know, you seem to be enjoying yourself.
Oh, folks, there's so much to obsess over on this picture. And before we leave you, we have to talk about a couple of Christopher Nolan's obsessions on this special episode about the Odyssey on Do You See What I Mean? All right, welcome back. Now, Mia, like I said, there's so much to obsess over, and his movies and the way he makes them are so obsessive. He's this technician. He's a master. He insists on IMAX. He collects these global casts. There's a lot of things to obsess over. What came out for you is when you watch the Odyssey? Oh, this is something that he does. This is something he does in other films. What were you thinking about as far as his obsessions?
Well, number one, I really love what he does with time. He does have a formula. He always has
sure.
Obviously he can't have a character who's just always certain about everything. So I was recently watching, was it a Guy Ritchie movie? And let me tell you, that movie was fun. And I think it was the Ungentlemanly's Guide
in the
to
Grey?
The
Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yes, the Ministry.
So good.
It is so
Henry
funny,
Cavill.
and it makes me laugh so hard. But I was like, these guys are so certain the whole movie that it's just fun. But that is not a Nolan type of film. He wants them to lose a little certainty. He wants them to crack a little bit. They always lose track of time in some way, which honestly is our only true value. So instead of them losing their money all the time, they're trying to capture life and get back into living life. But they always lose time. They always have to reconstruct reality. Which is interesting because,
like an Inception.
That's something the brain is capable of doing.
You mentioned Ellen Page and her character in Inception, which is about a man whose reality is broken, as you say.
Yeah.
She finds out that he's being hunted by his dead wife, and he's been concealing that to a team of people.
That's so right.
And she says, like, hey, you didn't tell us the real stakes here. There's something else. And also, by the way, we're talking about Nolan's obsessions. This is something that he loves doing. He loves to double the stakes. So he loves to present a really difficult situation and layer a second really difficult situation on it. Do you remember Insomnia with Robin Williams and Al Pacino?
Yeah.
Al Pacino is an LA cop that goes to Alaska.
Yeah.
It's daylight all the time.
Yeah.
That is reality bender number one. The second is you got to find a serial killer. So you're right about, like, the reality is being questioned, and then you have another character questioning that reality. So I understand what you mean about.
That does not always work. Sometimes they have to wake themselves up. So remember, he has to carry around with him certain things that remind him. Yeah. Everybody has to have one, and no one else can know who's got which one and what is
whose totem
yours.
has it. Yeah,
and you don't want to lose it, but
and I think one of the beauties of Greek mythology and Greek writing is how fallible everyone is. I mean, this real poem they could not have put on screen. There was so much, honestly, there's so much rape in this poem and death and murder. They get into some of that, but it is also part of Greek mythology that this person, Penelope, and I agree with you. I don't think she's deluded. I don't think this is someone who is living in her own fantasy. She knows where she lives, but she is faithful. And there are characters in life, there are people in life who can parse all the different interweaving complications and not lose themselves to madness. And I just wonder, Mia, if there's something about gender there. I mean, it's like when you were saying, yeah, there are men who wait for women. You know, it's not all gendered, but
Gender is
here's a
sometimes
story
very
in where
social in construct. You know what I mean? Like people's
no, for
hearts
sure,
can,
and that, which is a
yeah,
good yeah,
yeah,
which is a good tie-in with Elliot Page too. Elliot Page, when they were Ellen Page, they were the moral conscience of
yeah,
Inception.
yeah,
She was the moral conscience. Hey, why are you doing this? You know the truth. You're misleading these people. In I almost said the Trojan horse. In the Odyssey, Elliot Page is saying, "Hey, you know the truth. Why are you misleading these people?" There's something about
yes,
being that
yes,
moral voice,
yeah.
this same time
And
around.
they tell him too. They're
But
like, "Hey, be careful! Don't tell everybody what's fixing to happen. Like, keep it to yourself. You never know. You know, the voyage is about to be long and hard." And it's an individual journey to have things revealed to you in time. I think when you go to
yeah,
therapy, a lot of times your therapist isn't going to do this like, girlfriend, this ship's going down. They're going to
no,
ask
for
you
sure, yeah,
questions,
right,
and they're going to ask you, are you ready
yes,
to open that door and examine this? But I had a
yep,
situation, and people are going to be like, oh no, she didn't, not her dog. But I had a situation. I was at work. My
ah,
dog ran away, and my dog walker calls, and he's like, look, I need you to sit down. And interesting enough, he's like, your dog ran away. We're out looking for him. He got hit by a car right when he ran away, and we can't find him. And I remember at that time, I was like, and I have this thing, and I'm like, I'm typically pretty calm for this. And I remember he told me later, he was like, you were eerily calm. Because inside, I kind of asked myself, I was like, is this dog lost forever? Is Fred lost? I didn't feel that when I left home today. Because I'm telling you, I would have had a feeling. And I swear to God, this happens to me often. And when I tell you, I didn't have that
mm,
feeling. I never had that feeling when I left my house and went to the office. And when he called, I just remember thinking, I just got to go home because that's technically what I'm
yeah,
supposed to do. But I remember knowing, I'm like, this dog is going to be found. Like, I wasn't really, I would hate to say this, but I really wasn't as worried as you would think. I just knew it was going to take all freaking day to do it. But in my heart, I knew this dog was mine. I knew he was coming home. He was found. I mean, when I got home off the train, I had already had text messages that he was spotted, he was found, and he was getting taken somewhere. But I could have sat on the
wow,
whole ride home just like, I don't know, and panicking and freaking out. But I knew there was something in me that was like, let's check that gut. Is this dog gone? Was that the last time you saw
mm,
Fred was this morning? And I
yeah,
just knew it was like, no. But it's something where
yeah,
I do have that for just about a lot of things. Even it's just like a feeling you get when you go, like, I even do this with jobs. When I go into jobs, I'm like, am I going to be here for what, 5 years? And that gut will say nope. And I'm like, what about 4? And the gut will be like, no. And I may love that job. I may be like, this job is great, but I know in my gut there's something about it that's meant to be a little more temporary. So I'm one of those people that I'm like, I'm with Penelope. If you don't have that feeling, honestly, you're going to regret just collapsing over nothing. You're gonna feel
yeah,
frustrated if you give out over something as ridiculous as just some bad news.
yeah,
Hers is
yeah,
much tougher than that. But I definitely think Christopher Nolan does chase that in his characters. When you talk about Inception, when we talk about Memento, Lenny asks him, he's like, how do you know if you got that killer? And he goes, I would know. I would know if I got the killer. I would know. And technically,
you would
he's not
know just
wrong.
intrinsically,
Technically, he's not wrong because technically, he's the killer. I mean, sorry, spoiler alert,
right?
but he was like,
No,
I would know if I got him. And they were like, but you don't remember anything. And he's like, I would feel
right,
it in here. And I definitely believe that's a part of the human existence, is that we
yeah,
have that ability to track in, unless, of course, you like living in a somewhat delusional life. It's really hard to trust that gut if you like tricking yourself all the time.
yeah, right,
That's the tough
yeah,
part, you know.
yeah. I mean,
Which
this idea about this, yeah,
which shows up in the Prestige. You know, there's a little bit of that in the Prestige where they're like, you,
Which is an underseen. The Prestige is an underseen Nolan movie. I mean, you have David Bowie as Nikola Tesla. Come on, and you have Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, two incredible performers. But that also is about time, and it's about the self and its self duplication, and all of his films deal with those similar obsessions of self, time, maybe redemption. A couple other movies that came to mind as we were talking about this one were A Space Odyssey. I mean, it's literally called A Space Odyssey, 2001 from 1968. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is based on the Odyssey. Coen Brothers, great music. Apocalypse Now, Cold Mountain, that's a great one, actually. Tough to watch, but a good one. And then we should mention that last year, Juliette Binoche and Ralph Fiennes, two towering legends of our generation, starred in a film called The Return, which is about Odysseus' return to Ithaca. And also, Ralph Fiennes is ripped to shreds. Did you see that one, Mia?
yeah.
I mean, you have never seen Ralph Fiennes. He's like Ralph Jason Bourne. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah.
I think part of what makes this film so special is just the totality of it. I mean, just the grand scale and the indelible imagery. We haven't talked anything about production design or costume or music, but they're all phenomenal. I mean, Agamemnon's helmet with the gold vertebrae, or and Calypso's look, and the Cyclops played by Bill Irwin. I mean, these are arresting images that just will stay with us, just like these other films that you mentioned. It's an epic.
It's an epic.
It's the definitive epic.
Wait, can I ask you a question though? Epic. We got to go back to this, Joey.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, you're hanging out with Penelope. What you've lived life and long enough to know what your response is. Would you be wanting her to move on, or would you feel like it's okay? What's your vibe? What's your vibe?
Absolutely move on.
I love it.
No chance. I mean, and I've talked about this on this podcast before. I've been married twice. The first time, my partner at that time found someone who was better for her, and I was like, "Oh my God, you guys are so happy. You should be together. You should move on." And then the second one was a bit more of an open sort of poly situation. So if I were Odysseus and if I had Zeus Mobile, I would have texted her the minute we got to Troy. I would have said, "Beach is cold. LOL. No hair dryers. Please have fun, wink, 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 emoji." Like and also I would say, "Hey, I will let you know if I can come home. Like there's some nice island action." Yeah, like there's, Zendaya's here, Charlize, Daddy's been away from home. I absolutely would have encouraged her to, and
any hot daddies show up to court these days? Like...
Oh my gosh, that's another podcast. Now, what about you? What would you have said to your long-suffering partner on that rocky aisle?
Ooh, I definitely feel like you're gonna feel guilty kind of wanting to hold them up, but I personally don't think I would have wanted my partner to feel shame about wanting to hang on. So there is a dynamic there where I'm like, you really do have to do with what your heart determines and what your, you know what I mean? It's like, you're not going to be happy with yourself if you think that you know what I mean, did not do what was, what was right for who you are. And if that was the love of your life, like Helen Hunt is saying, then I'm sorry. I think it's totally their call. The only time, let me tell you something, the only time they would start to get on my frickin' nerves is as if there's a dynamic where, you're over there on Troy, you're on assignment, and they keep asking, should I come and meet you, at that war? Should I, that's that dynamic where I'm like, I thought you got the point when I left. Like what this is about to be. I hate being here too. So please stop making this more painful than it has to be. So I wouldn't want Zeus Mobile. You said Zeus Mobile. I would not want some Zeus Mobile. But I definitely feel like there's something really beautiful about transformative type of love. I just feel
There
like
is.
in real life, sometimes with these types of characters or these types of individuals who kind of hold out, um, there's a space where you still have to be present with everybody. So you do have Penelope, and she is shut away. I mean, she is shut off from
Yeah.
the world,
But
and
and the other thing about Penelope though, Mia, and this is in the text, as they like to say, is that in the poem, the suitors are not great. So she's sort of fucked. Odysseus gets to have the adventures.
yeah.
He gets to be in a horse. Actually, that doesn't sound great. He gets to sleep with Circe. He gets to sleep with Calypso. There's probably some other folks along the way, let's be honest. He gets to do all this stuff, and yeah, you're 20 years away from home, and that's certainly a bummer.
No, the food's not
But
great.
Penelope doesn't get to have any fun. The guys are not great. That's a key point in the narrative too. It's almost as if Homer is saying, well, he can't be saying that women deserve to have no fun, but
I don't
she
know if I
she is in prison. He is out in the world, and she is in prison.
I think you're
basically.
thinking he's having fun, but I think he's basically, when there's here's that moment. You know, when you're out, you're having a really hard time, and somebody's like, "We're at the club."
I don't know what that's like.
You know, we're at the club. You might as well just live it up.
The club.
And then you're just like, all right, shot, 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 shot. But it's not really.
I wanna make love. It's club.
It's not that fun. It's really just like you're trying to make peace with what life has brought you. So I don't necessarily see Odysseus as like partying it up per se. I see him as
He stayed with Circe for a year.
Okay,
He stayed with Calypso for 7 years.
You're like, the
I mean,
sex
he-
was had to be
I'm
that
not
good.
saying that it was. I'm not saying it was all about fun. I'm just saying that he had a diversity of experiences, including intense loss, where Penelope, narratively, by Homer, was just not given much to do. But I do think that at that time, Homer was perhaps providing examples of an education around what it means to be sort of a good member of society, because as he wrote Odysseus is very complicated, and yes, he was heroic, but he did a lot of damage.
I want you to think about it
Penelope
like
did
this.
not do damage.
I want you to think about it this way. It's almost like he went off and he met a lot of really shitty girlfriends, okay? So one of them is feeding him stuff
Hey,
that helps
freedom
him.
for Calypso, freedom for Circe.
She's like, I mean, you looked hungry and those memories seem painful. This is not a situation where he was entering into these dynamics the same way he entered into his marriage. You know, these people are tricksters. They have some very
So
dark,
you're talking about me or Odysseus?
they have the dark arts behind them. I don't really see him as like, it's like that kind of like, it's like that scary sex, where the it's like that dynamic.
Scary like masks?
Like it's like a dynamic where I don't really
Like
feel
kabuki?
like it's as how do I say it? It's not like he's heading into these relationships full body, spirit, and soul. These people are manipulating him. These people
No, that's
are
true. That's
presenting
true.
different realities that aren't there. I mean, that kind of stuff is like it's more frustrating the 7 to 8 years later than it was like I was having fun. I think it's more of like imagine you went off on this whole ride. You're going from port to port, and you meet these women who have
In Queens, apparently.
who have the type of chlamydia that makes you lose your memory. I mean, come on, this is not necessarily like this isn't as like fun as it seems just because he's entering into these spaces with hot chicks. So I honestly think of it like
You
this.
know what?
He's getting a lot of STDs, and some of these make him lose his memory. Some of them make him lose his friends. Some of them make him lose his. It ain't smooth sailing.
You know what? You know what I'm going to tell you, Mia? Mia takes 2 pills a day for 7 days. I'm good with it. We're all going to be 1 week older. We can get past that. Also, if I am ever on an island with Charlize Theron, you will never see or hear from me again.
He's like, this flower is delicious.
I will Absolutely. It also looks very pretty, and she has stunning resort wear. I am not trying to get back to this rocky island that doesn't have a beach. I do love my weaving wife, and I would do anything for Anne Hathaway as well. But we're talking about Charlize Theron. I'm not coming home.
He said, "I'm
sorry.
not coming home." This is Joey.
No,
Joey,
I'm never coming home.
Joey smooth sailing us into closing.
Literally smooth sailing. Also, I can't sail, so I wouldn't have even been there. You know. Real quick, what would you say is your top one or two? Like, what are your Nolan favorites looking back? So we just had the Odyssey. You have talked about Memento, The Prestige, Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Oppenheimer, and now the Odyssey. What are one or two of your favorites? I'm just curious.
I'm gonna be honest. I love the simplicity of Memento, and when it came out, it was genius. It was an indie. It was like kind of one of those things that you didn't see in theater. You had to go to the Hollywood Video or Blockbuster. You rented this weird movie where there was only 2 discs. And man, it really was. There was 2 discs, and one of them was checked out, and one's for you. And you're not bringing it back on time because you're going to tell your friends to watch it. So I did like Memento. I did enjoy a lot of the Batman elements that he brought in, because I was not the comic book girl, right? I wasn't that girl, but man, he makes you look at legend and myth and building identities that allow for people to have hope and believe. I love his concepts and how they live on more larger than life than the characters. So that one, and I definitely enjoyed the concepts in Interstellar, but I'm definitely more of a Jodie Foster contact girl. So that's my Matthew McConaughey go to space moment.
By the way, this is the second time you've mentioned Jodie Foster. She has a new film in which she speaks fluent French called A Private Life.
Oh,
Have you seen this one?
I did see this at theater, and I enjoyed it a lot.
She is on fire.
Did you watch it?
She is unreal. Yes, I watched it this last weekend. I don't love the picture overall. It gets very melodramatic. There's too many scenes in cars. But I will tell you, just watching Jodie Foster after all these years, she was this woman. She was smart. She was sexy. Her French. Like, she is, I just have such respect for her. She is working. She is unreal.
This one was fun for me because it pulls out the personality disorder vibe. So she's treating a patient, and the patient is actually got a personality disorder. And so she follows this mystery, but it turns out like she was supposed to trust the diagnosis, which is... These people are not, they're not accurate narrators of their own life. They are known. In fact, if I'm not mistaken,
the unreliable narrator.
They are very highly unreliable narrators and are typically not as well received by therapists because of it. They're very difficult work.
Oh, okay.
So one of the fun parts about the mystery is if you get the first part, when you watch the film, if you're familiar with the personality disorder, you're kind of like, I like the descent that Jodie Foster is making here. But if you're not familiar with the personality disorder, you are going to follow it just like a wonderful suspense thriller. And it is an enjoyable film. It has some weak spots, but the French that she speaks is beautiful.
It is amazing. I know. Well, it has been a blast to talk with you about this incredible epic, and Mia, it kind of is the tentpole of the summer. There's not a lot happening after this. We're going to come back with you for season 3 of Do You See What I Mean in the fall, and we've got the Tom Cruise comedy, I guess, called Digger by Alejandro Inarritu. We've got The Social Reckoning. We have Whale Fall. That's an insane trailer, folks. Check that out. We've got Hunger Games. We have Avengers, Doomsday. That trailer just came out. We have Dune Part 3. We've got Robert Eggers' Werewolf coming out in December this year. And once again, thank you for listening so much. And please share with your friends and anybody who likes movies to help check out Do You See What I Mean?